Okay. Hello everyone. This will be a quick overview of Ansari Backend repo, how it works, and the main logic behind the structure and certain files that we have and the naming conventions and all of this. Supposedly this will be put in the README file at the end. So here in another monitor I have the topics that I'll discuss today, and we'll go one by one through them, and then we'll see if there's anything that was left unsaid. So the very first thing is a little bit weird. It's outside of the scope of what we're saying right now. It's literally just a tip, just before we get started, about VSCode, the IDE that I'm using here today. You probably know this, but there's a functionality called the global surf. You type Control-Shift-F in Windows, if I'm not a Mac user, and that will allow you to search for a specific term that you put here in the entire repo and tell you the files that have this term and where it was said, and you can click on it as you are seeing here. This is very useful, and I'll be using this a lot in today's video. I just thought I'll tell you this. And another cool shortcut is Control-P for me to go between different pages. Okay, so this is quicker than viewing the Explorer from here and collapsing and seeing the structure from the start and navigating to where I want to go. So Control-P is a lot quicker. But that's when you get a feel around the project structure, you'll be using these shortcuts more. Now let's actually start talking about the project itself. First, I'll be talking about the general structure of the repositories folders right here. So the main folders that we have. I will just briefly go through them. And so we have the first folder called data. It doesn't have anything else but موسوعة, a folder. And data here is initially just a folder where we get data specific to specific tasks, but since we rarely use this folder, it only has this file, zip tashkil from that. And you will see some inconsistencies in the structure here. So you can, after this meeting, you'll probably say something like, okay, but zip tashkil, it seems like a function that can go to utilities. As you'll see later, there's a folder called utilities. And you're probably right. Like, there can be some reordering done to the project to make it easier to understand. But this is the general structure for now. I'll probably pin this recording to a specific version on GitHub, just for if someone wants to trace what I'm doing here with the version that I'm using right now. So it doesn't have anything else, just this function, and we'll see what this function does later. I'm just going through the overall overview of the tasks functionalities, of the folders functionalities. The disk cache directory is just for caching. You won't see that. Like, it just is there when you run the code, but it's not really important. It's just internal code by the disk cache library, and so we'll go to that later. We then have the docs folder, and these, as you probably know, is for documentation related stuff in our project. And we'll probably, the recordings here only just have the list of chapters that I'm reading from right now, the topics that I'll talk about. But we'll see where we'll actually put this recording in the end. And then the structure of API responses, this is, okay, let me explain this. In specific parts of the code, I am receiving or sending data that you don't really see its structure in the code. And then if you see these JSON files, it will be easier for you to have a mental model of what we're dealing with in the code. So for example, this is a fast API request received from V2.0. You'll see that I am very subtle in my naming conventions in the files. Any long name, then that's made by me. so as you can see here, it's a bit long. So as literally the name says, if you have a fast API request that's received from a V2.0 instance, V2.0, I'll explain what this is in a second, then expect a structure like this. I literally, to get this, I printed it out in the terminal and put it here. I abstracted some info here. This was actually object in the terminal, so I said that this refers to an object instead of putting its elements, and etc. This is useful just for you to have a mental model. In this request object, you can say request.scope or request.headers, and you'll know what you expect, the structure of what you're expecting. I think this is just normal info that anyone who used the fast API knows, but I thought I'd write it and put little explanations here nonetheless. And then you have these other files. These are all related to WhatsApp logic. We can get to this later. But essentially, when we're dealing with Meta's API to get the requests from users on WhatsApp, we get these requests in this format. This is based on Meta's documentation. But Meta's documentation isn't really clear, to be honest. So I just got the request and printed it again internal and put it here. Yeah. So this, again, to give you a mental model. and any unique stuff, I abstracted it into these delimiters, the less than, double less than, and double more than, that I've hard coded these here. And here, for example, I'm saying possible values for this key. So this can be true or false, and etc. Like you'll understand when you see this file, but I really just wanna skim over the folders just for you to get a gist of the layout, like layout of the land of this repo. And these are similar files. So the difference here is this: when you get a reply message from the API of WhatsApp, it will have these keys, and this is when using Xerox. Like this is when the request comes from a Xerox instance, not from the actual WhatsApp server. Again, I'll explain Xerox. And this is for the final user message. These are really detailed based on the code that I'll show you later, or the WhatsApp code. So I'll neglect like full explanation of them now, but when you trace the code there, these will make sense for you. You'll know which one is related to which logic. And finally, we have this notebook file. This is it to ChatGPT. So how we receive the completion objects. So when you send a request to an LLM model, you expect from the LLM provider a response object. So this response object is what I have stored here. I again printed it in terminal, and I have it. So this is a model response object. This is a Python object which contains these attributes, ID and choices, and choices is a list of streaming choices, and this is another object, and etc. I also took that from the terminal and pasted it in here just for me to mentally visualize things. This will be useful when we go to ansari.py file, like any file that does the coding of the actual LLM done in this repo. And here you see an explanation of each attribute here. So the possible values which can be mentioned here, and here, so for example, the content, what is this? It's the content of the chunk message itself. So what is a chunk? It's based on if we're doing streaming or not. So if we're not streaming, then this will not be a chunk, it will be the whole message. And all of these details, if you read this file one by one, understand I'm very explicit in explaining the contents of this file, as you can see. Again, any long names or long explanations, then you know that I am the one who did that. This is related to docs. I just want to make sure that I'm following the plan properly. Yeah, explain docs. Great. Okay, so next we have the SQL files here. And this is the tricky part of this. So basically, what we have been doing since the start of this project is that we're writing the SQL code. We're using PostgreSQL, by the way. So we're writing the SQL code to create the tables. And whenever we make changes, we don't alter the initially written code. For example, a repo might do the following. They might make a file called dbsetup.sql, and it just have the SQL commands. And then whenever we make changes, like for example, let's say for example, later on, I decided to change this first name to first username, for example. So I want to change this column name. Then some repos, what they do is that they change the code here in line 8 and change it to first username. And then we do the changes ourselves in the production. So if you have the production server running right now with this table created, then we go to the production server, and then we do an alter command, alter first name to be alter username, first username. And then here, when we update this script, we just change this to first username. Okay? Here we don't do this. We don't do this logic. What do? We do incremental changes, as you see here. So 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, that means that at some point in the project, we did this change. And then in the future, if we want to update something, then we create a 02 file, and then we say what we updated. And this has an advantage and disadvantage. The advantage is that we know exactly you have a history of how we changed the database, our database, like what exact commands that we did. So we ensure successful replication each time. But the disadvantage is, to make this replication, we need to run all these files. So if I were to right now instantiate a local database in my laptop here, then I'll have to run these files one by one. This is the disadvantage, but this is how we did it, and we stuck with this logic for now. And this logic is useful for you to know in another two files. Actually, I'll go by them really quick and then get back to them later. Called setup database and Python app.yaml. So Again, I'll go to them again. But just to tell you why this logic is important, and you can't just change this logic, because changing this logic will imply you change these files as well. So in setup database, it's just a file that we made that if you want to set up this database locally, then you can run this script and it will import the files here. Like it will run this, passing the SQL directory, which is SQL, which is what I showed you above here, SQL. And the DB URL, which is in get settings. I will explain this later. But in short, it's just it has this default value. So it will set up locally with these URL. And it will create it. And will create it via this function, which will go through, iterate over each file that ends with SQL. See, so if we actually here, because I was about to do this at some point, I was about to, for example, to create an SQL here called an aggregated or all commands.sql, for example, which is just me concatenating all the SQLs in this file and this into one file, just for me to easily visualize what we did. But no, don't do that. Because doing this will affect other files like the ones I just shown you. It will be iterated over and the commands there will be run as well. So if you do that, create another SQL folder, SQL dev or SQL temp, whatever, and then do any changes that you want. But here in this folder, only increment. Do not change the previous, only increment. When I added WhatsApp features, I created a new script with what I want to increment the live server. Okay. The other file which also uses this logic is Python app.yml, and this is the CI/CD, what GitHub Action uses when we push any commit to GitHub. And so we won't go too much detailed here, but I just want to show you this line. This line, create database tables by running SQL scripts. So it's one of the jobs that the CI/CD pipeline does, is that it creates the tables by going through a for loop in the SQL file. So in a SQL folder. So this logic is applied twice. If you want to change this way of logging or tracing how we write SQL, then we have to take into consideration these two files as well. Okay. This is regarding SQL folder. Explanations of SQL, I don't think I really need to do that. Like, they are straightforward. Now you should be aware, or it should make sense to you, why we did a script called alter user tokens with just these alter commands. Like, any newcomer could say, wait, but why don't we just do not here, like a drop constraint? Okay, so why did we put it in the first place? You can just remove it in the first script. Sorry, but no, we don't do this because of the logic that I just said. We apply things incrementally. So yeah, I don't think I need to go in depth of the explanations of here. There's a nice diagram that I created, which visualizes the schema of the database that we have. This should be up to date with what we've done. Obviously, you see here dependencies and triangular dependencies. This isn't the best way to model things, but this is what we have right now, and it works. And we could refactor it soon. But the way that I did this is optional info, by the way, is using a tool called the DBeaver that I have here. It's free, and it's, in my opinion, the best IDE that I used for managing SQL-related, database-related stuff. And so there was just a button to generate this diagram automatically, and you can maneuver it around. There's a lot of solutions online, but this is the one that I used. Okay, so let it open in the back end and take its time. And for now, I finished the SQL part. Hopefully, I remember to say everything about it. Okay, so that was finished in line 15 here. And next should be the source folder, but I'll skip this folder for now because it has the bulk, the meat of the project. I will let this take its sweet time, and we'll move instead to tests folder. And so this was 9. So, by the way, this is DBeaver. And because here to create the database, I actually didn't run the file which is called setup database. I didn't do that. I actually just pasted, like I took all of the files here and just pasted them one below the other and made this naming. Like, this was the first file, paste, and this is the second file, and I then just ran all of these. So it's not the best way to do things, but hey, it worked. So yeah, obviously that was before I knew about the setup stuff. Okay, so back again to the test folder. So the test logic. Again, I'll just skim through this because there isn't really much. We're using pytest library here, and in each of the main files in the repo, you'll see me add like couple of comments, Python comments, to explain the overall objective of this file. Obviously, you don't have to read all this. If you are one who understands better by reading the code, then skip that and read the code. That's why I put it in the start, so that all of the big old comments which explain the overall reason of this file and what it does and all of that, I put it in the start, because if you want to skip that, you can skip that, instead of just putting them amidst the code here. So what is amidst the code here as just few lines, not overall logic. And any technical notes or tricky notes or explanation for those who don't know, I leave that at the start. So again, literally from its name, this file aims to test the main API endpoints of the app, which is this file, and this is in the source folder. I'll go to that later, using pytest library and fast API test client. The steps here, literally all of this was like ChatGPT generated. It's just we go through the code here and it just gives an overview of what we're currently testing. There is a disadvantage of this, is that whenever we make changes in the code, if we, for example, remove a test entirely, then we have to remember to remove it from here as well. So this is also a disadvantage of this method, but at least it decouples the comments a little bit from the rest of the code. So yeah, like anything else, there are advantages and disadvantages. But for now, we're leaving this as is. Maybe in the future, we'll make a dedicated documentation file which stores all of these comments and all of these files, and we refer. Like we can say here, refer to header ethic for this specific info, and etc. But for now, we're leaving this as is. Okay, so these are the general steps. I really don't think I need to go through them. If you read them in your own time, you understand that. And literally some of them are too verbose, because again, these are AI generated. So you have import necessary modules, and you can see that. So there are some details that we don't need to go through. While I was making these comments, I was thinking of what might like a newcomer who really don't know the tech stack of what we're using need. For example, if someone doesn't know PyTest that much, what can I say here that can help them understand this new tool? So when I read the code, because I really wasn't familiar, even myself, I wasn't familiar with PyTest before this coding. But when I read the code, it's understandable. Even the naming conventions are clear, and so I know what this test aims to do. And these are comments are saying it, so there isn't really much to do. But for example, this decorator, I don't understand this. Another decorator for markers, I didn't understand that as well. So stuff like this, which I think isn't really understandable at first glance, even by newcomers, stuff like that, I put it in comments. So here I explained. And obviously you can see websites which explain this as well. I don't have to put all of that explicitly here. But try to give a gist of what's happening, instead of you seeing websites which sometimes overcomplicate explanations. I'm not going to dive deep into like technical details of how PyTest works, to be honest. This is not the aim of this recording. But hopefully this main comment block is enough. And obviously in these technical notes, I put an optional here, or between brackets or anything, just to indicate that this, you can read that if you think that's worth of reading. But if you know that info already, you don't have to read it. And normally when I put this note as well in capitalization, it's probably also a technical note. Like these are just general steps of what we're doing here and why this file is created. But this is like technicalities. Like for example, here, if you didn't understand what is a test client in FastAPI, then I'm explaining it here how it internally works, so that you know that we're not internally creating a server. It's just emulating the creation of a server. But it's not creating one. So maybe that info is useful to you. Yeah, this is, I think, enough for the testing file here. There's another one for the quality. This one specifically is just to see that the responses from the model that we use is currently ChatGPT 4.0 is good enough. Good enough. How do we decide good enough? It's based on data sets that we have. So for example, we ask it a question here, and based on, and give it some options here, separated by commas, and give it the correct answer. And so in this test answer quality file, we take this CSV, for example, and we split the columns here. We give it the questions initially, and we give it the options, and we tell the LLM to answer based on the solution that we made here in the project. And so if it answers correctly, we see how many questions it answered correctly, and based on that, we give it a score. Obviously, the more data sets we have, the better, and we have a dedicated data set for this, I believe. Okay, I think there are other data sets that we tested on. If you go to Ansari project itself, here, you'll see Ansari data sets. Yeah, that's here. We just created this a couple of months ago, I believe. Yes, 5 months ago. And I'm not sure if the other dataset here, we use it in the code right now, but CSV1 is the main one that we use. This is also for you to know if you would like to contribute in the evaluation part. This file, I might explain it. This file is called, like this syntax is Jinja. Jinja is J-I-N. And test files here use this formatting, but replaces the question and options with what we have from the CSV here. So, okay, so how do we find something like this? This is actually a good test for what I explained to you previously about the Control-Shift-F part. So if, for example, say you're a newcomer to the project and you want to see how is this file used, okay? You might Control-P to see the available pages with this name to ask question, and you will not see anything except this file, okay? Good enough, this will not work. Let me try Control-Shift-F. This will search the content of the files and see where is this name mentioned. So if I say ask a question, okay, I find it here. I find it here, the question, which is the disk answer quality. So that's actually how I myself knew that before doing this video. And we see that it's used here, and we see that it uses tn, which is based on Jinja here, the thing that I told you about. And so it reads the question, the template from here, and based on it, splits it from the CSV. So it is this tool, this shortcut Control-Shift-F is very useful, the global search feature. This is something. Tricky note though, I actually searched with underscore here, even though the file's name is ask question with a dash. So if we do this here, we actually will not find it. We won't find it. We'll only find it here in a .egg file. This file isn't necessary, and I won't go into its explanation. It's actually auto-generated and it isn't useful for us, so ignore any .egg files, they are useless for us. If we do that with a dash, like it's naming here, we won't see it. And this is a slightly tricky part about the global search method of finding things, is that sometimes you'll have to take substrings of what you want to search about and hope it matches with something. Sometimes it's the case and sometimes it's not. Again, you don't have to always do the solution, like it just depends on what you're trying to search. Because I'm searching for a name here, for a question here, then obviously VSCode won't help me. Like VSCode won't give me referencing. Like I can't control click this and see previous references. But in something like data here, I can do that. So if I control click data, I can see where it was mentioned in this file. So it was mentioned here, so test Ansari agent relies on the data function to get the data here. Yeah, so the Control-Shift-F is very useful when it's tricky to use symbols, okay? To rely on symbols that VSCode can reference for you. Okay, I'm sorry I went a little off topic here, but because we really should see the features of your IDE, because it will really help you down the road. So yeah, I think I finished the tests part. Yeah. And and now I believe I finished the folders, the explanations of the folders. So these are all the folders. Obviously, I'm leaving source for the end. This is the hierarchy of how we're working. Obviously, the .vscode file is just an internal folder that has the settings based on VSCode here. So I am the one who wrote these files. These are in the gitignore file. So I here put extra settings that I find useful for me. But you don't have to follow these. And I will not explain what these settings do because that's out of the scope. But you don't need them. If you don't want them, you will not need them. So yeah, I really shouldn't explain this. And yeah, here we're finished with the purpose of repos folders. And now I'll explain the purpose of root files. So we start this on 10:10. Oh. Hopefully you are not bored by now. Okay, so the purpose of root files. So before going to source, I will explain the root files over here. Explain some of them at least. With the order that I have here. I will skip .env example for the end, because that's the most important one, and it's heavily tied with source folders, I explain later. The .python version, okay, this is a tricky one. Previously, if you see any previous commits, you will see that this file was called runtime.txt, but we changed that. Why did we change this? Because of the following. These are really extra info, but it may help you as well in other projects, so why not? We are using Heroku service to deploy our server to that platform in order for it to appear to all the users that we have. Heroku has some guidelines and some announcements that come every now and then. One of these announcements is that the runtime text file is deprecated. What the heck is a runtime.txt file? A runtime.txt file, let me see if they actually explain it here. Okay, so basically it tells platforms like these, like Heroku, what is the Python version that you currently run. This is basically what it does. So if you see here, we have it, we were running this, but this is for the server. Like this, the server of Heroku, which will host the application, should run on this. This is what I understand, but I'm not sure about this though. Or maybe this refers to the actual application that we have itself, which will run on 3.13. Maybe this is the case as well. I need to recheck this. Essentially, it's just a configuration that tells Heroku which Python version to run. Okay, and it was previously called runtime.txt, but they decided to change it, and this is actually new news. And the effective change will be on 6th of February. Yeah, as you can see, we should have changed it, and so I did, even before this recording, to Python version. They are the ones who suggested this. So they said here, we should make it a .python version file, and this makes more sense, to be honest, because that's literally its objective. It's just to tell us the Python version. So it makes sense to rename it like this. Okay, so this is the use of this file. This literally shouldn't have taken me more than a minute, but I don't know why I took a long time explaining it. There is also a Procfile here. This is also used by Heroku in order to, okay, I want to explain this. Rather than I explain it and missing any important detail, I will literally just say its exact use in front of you. This is the best article that I found explaining it, this one. It's literally just a starting point for any app running on Heroku. So where you declare one or more processes to be run for your app to function. So we first run the commands here before our application starts, our server starts in the deployed Heroku instance. Okay. So for example, we can say the following: what are the commands, what are the processes that we need to initialize before we start running our server? Okay. So this is an example, it's just echo example. So if you see here, just zoom in. Each one here just writes an echo. If you run this Procfile, you'll see in the console, in the logs of the Heroku environment website, you will see in their logs something like this. Echo spinning up the web process, which is this one, and the normal works the booting, which is this one, and etc. So here, we're using only web, I believe, web command. Yes, web here. And we're passing these. So what are we saying here? We're basically saying we want the Python path to be this, which is the current Python path variable that we have, object that we have in the environment, and source, to put the source folder, which is this one. So to put source in the Python path. This is what I understand from this. For us, if we make imports and etc. in the main Python files, it will be understood. Like they will understand what source is. Okay, and to use a unicorn server, number of workers is 4. I don't really need to go into depth with it, but this is just saying to Heroku how we should configure the environment variables and the infrastructure of the server which is running our deployed application. Okay, and any extra configurations for it. So this is the use of this file. We rarely touch this file, so a brief explanation of it is sufficient. Then we have the pyproject.toml file over here. This contains configurations for the overall project. There are a lot of documents online explaining what you can achieve with a pyproject.toml file. So I won't really go into depth here. And there are infos that you can deduce even without reading something online. You can deduce that, okay, this is the file that allows me to put metadata regarding the project, like the its own page and documentation, etc. But what I want to explain out of all of this is this part. So we are using a linter called ruff. And what is the linter here? It's basically when we're writing code, we want to abide by certain practices. And so which practices do we abide by? There are a lot of options online, a lot of guides, a lot of guidelines. So we use the guidelines related to ruff. Okay, so even if because to be honest, I don't really know how to say its exact definition. I will not get anything. Okay, now I want the tool. tool files. Yeah, static code analysis tool designed specifically for Python. Okay, and we are using it again for speed and efficiency. So when we get ruff here and we install it here, it will efficiently and quickly scan the code that we're writing and say that, wait, you are not following our guidelines in this specific principle. What are their guidelines? One of them is, for example, that we have put here in this repo, is that we can't exceed a certain amount of characters in our repository, in our entire repo, in a certain line. So each line would have a maximum of, if you point here, 127 characters. Okay, so here you see an issue called line too long because it has 141 characters and you're only allowed to have a maximum of 127. Okay, and it's saying what the guideline is. Like this is the guideline ID which specifies this. So if you open this, it will explain it here. Okay, the preview panels of the IDE are really important, so it will help you out a lot. So here it explains it. Now it does checks for lines that exceed specific maximum character length. So you understand it now. So an important remark about this is that in the CI/CD pipeline, we say that the job failed and that the code that you're trying to push to our project failed if it doesn't meet the guidelines of ruff. Okay? Because some repos don't put that hard deadline. No, we put that not deadline, sorry. That defining line, like a strict defining line of how to write code. We have strict rules here. Okay, what defines this rule? Like, how do you know these rules? In the pyproject.toml file. So here you see line length is 127. Okay, so if I change this to 130, for example, then I can add here 3 more characters. Wow. There are some other stuff that we also add as guidelines here. And there are guidelines that we ignore. For example, if we put in the list here, these guidelines, which again, you can see a list of guidelines in the official website to see which ID you should put for which logic that you want to ignore. This list will be ignored. For example, this guideline says that for any function that you make, you should add doc strings, like documentation, okay, if I recall correctly. And so putting it here in the ignore means that no, we can have some functions, let me actually remove this, we can have some functions, like this one actually, which doesn't have a doc string, okay, which doesn't have a doc string like this, which explains what the function does. And so these are other stuff that we ignore, okay, and you can continue on with the list. Okay, but what do we have? What if we have an exception? What if for some reason, we want this specific comment to exceed or bypass this guideline? We point here, and in the quick fixes, disable for this line, which will put this. Putting this will make ruff when it checks the code. When it passes by this line, it will say, okay, so this line is an exception, so I will not run my analysis on that line for this guideline. Okay, so this is also an important thing to remark, because I think we use this in the repo somewhere. No QA research, yeah, we used it here. So this actually failed with me in a previous commit where we had an issue in the live server where this specific clause didn't work, and so we commented out here. So when we commented it out here, you will see, if I uncomment this, you will see this wiggly, squiggly yellow underline saying that this variable is assigned but never used. This is a rough guideline that we just broke right here, and it's hyperlink. And so if we deploy this right now as is to GitHub, it will fail. The CI/CD, which I showed you previously in here, in the Python panel, remember that? Yeah. We have another one right below it about the linting. Stop the build if there are lint errors. So it does a rough check command based on the pyproject.toml file, as I showed you, and makes the output compatible to GitHub to show on the GitHub actions, as I'll show you later. Okay, so yeah, this failed. This actually failed on live on the main branch. The quick and easy fix for this is to either remove this entirely and remove this entirely, and I do not want to do that because we want to return that when we fix things, or I can simply put this new QA. Okay, put this no check, and again highlight quick fix and disable for this line. Okay, what else do we have? This is for the pyproject.toml. One final thing regarding ruff, you can get the VSCode extension here, because again, these squiggly lines, how do they appear to me? They appear because I installed here an extension in VSCode called ruff. Wait for it. It will appear here. Okay, yes, here it is. Okay, you should install it and you should have it activated. And one way to see this, that it's activated, is that you can see, is it because I'm zoomed in, you can see it? 1 second, if I zoom back, yeah, you can see here in this part, if you highlight here, you can see that ruff is working. Here, open it close to make sure it's working. I'm saying this because sometimes it doesn't work. And I will not say when these times are. I will just point you to an issue that I made. I actually don't have this link now, so either way, these logs can be beneficial, because if ruff is not working, then you will struggle a little bit in this project, because if you accidentally bypass or don't abide by one of the guidelines of ruff, and then you commit and then you push, you will be surprised with a GitHub action saying that no, the job failed because they didn't abide by the rules. So obviously it's better for you to know them in advance before committing and pushing to GitHub. So this extension is important. Okay, so if it doesn't work, then you know where to go here. And you normally open up an issue in the ruff repo on GitHub and state to the developers the issue that you faced and these logs right here. Okay. But hopefully you'll not encounter these issues. It really happens. So this is all I want to say regarding the pyproject.toml file and ruff. I believe I don't have anything else to say in it. These are all ruff specifications. You can read about them in your own time. But you really don't even need to understand all of them. It's just whenever you break one of the rules, you will see an indicator that says that you broke them. And in VSCode, God knows VSCode really shows that to you. So if you did that, the entire file here is marked in yellow and yellow here, and even this part, you can see the screen, like this part in the right, that has a mini map of the code. It will show you the line which have the issue, so you can point it here and you can see that you know. So don't worry about that. This is all related to the pod project. I'm sorry that I took a long time in this, but hopefully it is clear for you now. The pytest.ini file, okay. So we have next. Where was that? Actually, I can't see it here, so I will use my trusty shortcut. Yeah, okay. Okay, I can redirect you after this video in the video description or whatever to resources for understanding the usage of this file. But to summarize, it just sets up, like, how can I say, configurations in order for the Python test files to abide by. For example, we defined a marker here called async.io, and we give it a description. Okay, so now if we go here in async.io, here, this will be understood by the pytest framework when you are running the script, because we defined it here, as well as the Python path. So here, if you remember, when I say Python path, no, wait, I think this automatically sets the Python path for source. So what this does is, when we run this script using pytest library, in the environment where this script is running, it will automatically put the source into the list of environment variables, the Python path variables. You can see a detailed explanation of each of these keys in the articles that I'll post with the description in this video. We rarely, again, modify this file, so just knowing that it's related to the configurations of the pytest files is good enough for now. Then we have the README file. Where is it? Then we have the README file over here. The README file is a little bit outdated, to be honest. Just a quick shortcut, you can, in VS Code, click on Ctrl-Shift-V to open the page in a preview mode. So it's just a little bit cleaner than the Markdown equivalent. And I know I should have started the recording with the README, but I did. Because there are also some outdated stuff in it. We'll add a link of this recording to the README when we're done, because it will be more up to date. So I don't really need to go over its content, because that's the whole purpose of this video. Just a quick tip I can say, at least regarding this part. There's a quick way to auto-generate a table of content based on the Markdown headers here. If you install a library called, you install that, and then you open the command palette in VS Code, which is in Ctrl-Shift-P, which open this here. You can say table of content, and here create table of content, which when I press, it generates this one. And now when I update any of this, Ctrl-S, it gets updated here. This is also useful for documentation purposes. Okay, and now for the requirement.txt file. I am going by this project bit by bit. Hopefully you are not bored. Requirements.txt. So as you can see here, we don't put the entire requirements like that. We don't pin the requirements. We don't put exact versions here. This is just for easy upgrade purposes, to easily upgrade the things. And if we see issues between certain dependencies, we can pin versions. For example, we pin this to these range of versions. I think because version 2.0 could introduce breaking changes in the API code that we have in the repo itself, where we used this library, and so we don't want that, and so we limited this to that scope only. How do you know? You don't really until you see stuff breaking in the life. But overall, we don't use pinning. We use exact versioning here, and so based on that, we don't use pip freeze commands. So the pip freeze command just tells you, based on the environment that you have open, the version environment that you have open, the list of all the commands that you have, list of all the libraries that you installed, and with its versions. But we don't want that verbosity. We just want to state which libraries we actually ran the command pip installed on. Okay, because the pip freeze command, it says these libraries that we installed and any other libraries which our installed library depend on. So if I installed pandas, for example, it installed NumPy in the background. So you will see, I believe, if I remember correctly. So you see NumPy over here, even though I don't think we installed, we don't have NumPy here explicitly. We don't wanna make this list exhaustive. It's just for what we installed ourselves. So that means whenever we install a library in the future, if we're going to make any new feature, then we have to remember to put this install library as it's written here. We put it in its corresponding place in the requirements text. We do that manually, okay? And sort it. Preferably sorted. Won't matter. This is a quick shortcut for sorting. Control-Shift-P, and then you say sort lines ascending, and it will sort them ascending. Sorry, I go off topic a lot with these tips, but they are useful. Now for the setup database file. Wow, we're back with this file again. So I explained this before, but again, basically, this is just for you to be used by you, the developer, locally to create the missing tables in your local database. Or the missing database in general. If you don't have a database instance, you can start with this, okay? But to be honest, I didn't try it myself. Like I myself did the good old-fashioned method that I showed you before, which is just copy and pasting as you see here. I think there was just a remark, if for some reason you want to follow this method instead. I think there's just something that like a specific thing that you should comment. Yeah, here. In file 4, which is this file, create type. If you want to redo database changes, for example, you create a database instance and it has rows in a table, and you wanna wipe it all clean and truncate everything or remove it and then redefine the tables again for some reason, then just be careful that you should comment this in any later reruns, because it will give you an error. It will say that the type feedback class is already defined, because it is defined. I don't know if I'll be able to bring it here, but it is defined in another port than the ports where the schemas are defined. I think in rules? No, not rules. I won't go it now, but it remains in the editor that you're using, in the IDE that you're using. So it will give you an error. So in future reruns, you can comment this out. If it's your very first time running this, then you can leave it in, okay? It's just a very quick tip. If, again, for some reason you want to copy-paste all the files, like I did, instead of using the setup database file. Okay, and now we're done with this file. It really doesn't do anything else. It just loops over them and then logs that it imported this specific SQL script and then moves on. It really doesn't do anything special. And then comes VSCode. I need to drink water before explaining that part.